Hello, we are now in the third part of Module 3, where we focus on participatory visioning for peripheral rural areas. Our learning goal today is to recognize the role of participatory visioning in territorial development for the needs of peripheral rural areas. The definition of vision says that it is the overall image of what the community wants to be and how it wants its area to look at some point in the future. For peripheral rural areas, this would mean, what do we want our landscape to look like 20 years from now? Not only in the physical and biological terms, but also in terms of farming, other land uses in the area, as well as socioeconomic aspects. The participatory process in visioning means that the community itself describes the future it wants and plans how to achieve it. In participatory visioning process, we bring together all interested groups and sectors of the territory, the actors and stakeholders that we have identified from our peripheral rural area, so that they can jointly identify the problems, evaluate the changing conditions that they'll be facing in the decades towards their working, and then build collective approaches to improve the quality of life in the area. It is important to underline here that visioning requires positive attitudes and long-term perspective. It is not helpful if we get very much depressed in the current problems and we don't look positively in the future and identify ways how to overcome the challenges that arise from the current situation. The participation in the visioning process is important because if it is done properly, then it is very likely that we will have much more participants that will stay involved in the further planning process of the implementation for the vision. And this will then contribute to the establishment of a local culture of participation, which will be useful in future revisions of the vision for the peripheral rural area. The essence of the visioning process is providing the conditions for networking and allowing diverse groups of actors and stakeholders to come together and to interact constructively for identifying their joint vision, but also after that, working together to implement this joint vision. When we say that it's a visioning process, actually this process is a cycle where we start with the baseline assessment, which you looked at in Module 3, then the actor and stakeholder analysis for the territory, which we looked at in the previous part of this module. And on the basis of these assessments and analysis, we establish a small representative group of the community that will prepare the first preliminary draft of the vision. And this is the starting point in the cycle, which is create the vision. In fact, this is still a preliminary version of the vision. And this preliminary version then is shared with the wider community in the peripheral rural area so that more actors and more stakeholders can contribute to this initial draft of the vision. They can express their opinions, their recommendations, their proposals for improving this vision. And then we go in a next step in the visioning cycle, which is the fine-tuning of the vision, where we already take into account the recommendations and the proposals by the wider community in our peripheral rural area, and make sure that we incorporate as many of these proposals and recommendations as possible so that the final vision of the peripheral rural area is accepted, is approved, and is appreciated by the community as a whole in the territory. The next step in the cycle, which we name here as consolidate the vision, in fact requires, to the extent possible, to include this vision in some formal planning documents or semi-formal planning documents, or develop an action plan for the implementation of the vision, so that then each actor and stakeholder knows what can be done, where he can join or she can join and contribute or benefit from the implementation of the vision. Next logical step in the visioning cycle, after the consolidation and the planning for the vision, is a much longer period of implementation. It can be 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years, depending on the time frame that was taken up in the visioning process at its beginning. And inevitably, towards the end of this visioning process or period or midterm, depending on the needs, there comes the need for a review of the vision. This review of the vision requires, again, assessment of the situation, of the current situation that is in the territory. Again, assessment of actors and stakeholders, because if it's 20 years or 10 years from the initial periods, things would have changed, hopefully for the better, hopefully towards achieving the vision. So there is a need to review it, how much of it has been implemented, what needs to be changed, what are the challenges lying ahead in the next decade or 2 decades, so that a new vision is created and the visioning cycle begins all over again, with sharing it, fine-tuning it, consolidating, implementing, and reviewing. We have now some examples again from HNV Link project, where divisions for the high nature value farming in specific peripheral rural territories were developed by the teams working in these areas. And again, you will see that there are different approaches for presenting this overall image of the future of the territory that the community, its actors and stakeholders have developed. The first example is again from Portugal. And here we see that we have both image, pictures, drawings of how we, well, the people there want to see their territory, which is then described in a bit more detail with text outlining the specific aspects of the vision. Another approach for presenting the vision about HNV farming in their territory is from the Dartmoor in the UK, where they use the map of the territory, outline specific areas within this territory for specific interventions, and then illustrated these territories with photos and again text to present, to explain the vision that they have for the territory. Yet another example for a vision for a territory is from Sweden, where the team and the local people that participated in the development of the vision for this territory identified the key aspects of the vision, the environment, social life, and the economy, and also identified two underlying conditions for the success of their vision: the collaboration and co-production, and also certain preconditions for development. This is a different approach to visualizing the vision for the area, but it's still valid as long as it brings meaning for the participants in this visioning process. And there is yet another example from HNV Link project, which combines again images, graphic images, and some description. In this case, we have representation of the territory, its altitude, and the different farming systems that are characteristics for the different altitudes in this area, with certain requirements and needs or ideas for how the future should look like in this territory. So different areas, different participants in the visioning process, different approaches for presenting the vision. The most important aspect here is that this vision brings meaning to the local community and to the actors and stakeholders that participated in it. Again, no one approach for making the vision. It is important that it reflects the ideas, the wishes of the local communities that are in the specific peripheral rural area. And this is the end of the presentations in module 3. Your next activity here would be a submission of an essay on the visioning process in your selected case study area. So I wish you good luck in that.